I've got a question here for you all. Is it pronounced Jaguar or Jaguar? I ask because before I started teasing on this channel a while back that my own original character, Vasilia Kuznet, was a Were-Jaguar, I used to say Jaguar. But I thought it was funnier to say Jaguar, so I had her say it that way, and now it just feels more natural for me to say Jaguar? So I guess I'm just going with that. Still kinda doesn't feel right, but I don't know. Anyway, today is October's Community Redraw episode. Over the last month, my subscribers have been sending in their own original drawings of my characters turned into folklore creatures. I'm going to take 5 of my favorite submissions and redraw them myself, as well as draw the narrator of my folklore series. It's 2 episodes long, but you know, it's likely to become more of a series. And all that is going to fit into today's story, the redemption of the Were-Jaguar. You get it. Also, thank you to a subscriber who goes by Camille Creations for suggesting today's episode a long time ago. When she suggested it, she actually sent some really cool concept art for it. If you like the look of it, go give her a follow on Instagram. I'll link her Insta in the description. But anyway, let's get into the story, shall we? Let's go. Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. Vasilia inspected the blinking beacon on her arm curiously. While she was used to a wide array of weirdness from her own world, full of dragons, monsters, and magic, she was still getting used to the things she was learning about in other dimensions. Her friend Benny Sharp, who made her the now blinking wristwatch, had shown her how to use it to jump between dimensions, and had once mentioned that if it was blinking, as it currently was, it meant that their friends were either in trouble or looking for someone to aid them in a quest. Voslo! Brother Voslo, you want to go on quest to other dimension? It's time now, come! Her burly brother out in the yard called back.
Apologies, sister. I am teaching squirrel friends the sheetnik to juggle. Perhaps next time.
What? You said many times you desperately wanted to see other dimensions, Voslo. Then when I asked you to come to strange prison dimension few weeks ago, you refused. And now you refuse again?
Well, now I am busy, sister. Perhaps next time, go without me.
She tapped on the blinking beacon and rolled her eyes as purple light began to wrap around her. You know what you are being, Brother Voslo.
Yes, sister, I am being hypocrite.
Indeed you are, and you know I hate this. Before she could finish the sentence, the light wrapped over her mouth and face and eyes, then cleared in an instant, with her now standing outside her interdimensional friend's base of operations, the Sharp Tank. She walked inside and quickly found the whole group of her allies gathered. Hey, look at that, champ, she came after all. You owe me 75 cents, bud, Benny said, nudging Dr. Champagne McGregor next to him. What the flip is you talking about, Benny? We didn't make any bet, and why would we bet 75... You know, whatever. I'm glad you're here, Vasilia. I trust you to keep me alive more than most other people here. No offense to you, I just don't know you that well. Champagne and Benny were Vasilia's first and likely closest friends in the group, but she scanned the room quickly and found the mountainous stack of muscles with a charming grin, Heath Hurricane Reynolds, and walked over next to him. He winked at her as she came by. They'd been seeing each other for a while now, but were keeping it quiet in the group for the time being. She was glad Heath was willing to take it slow because Vasilia felt she could only truly be with him when she felt comfortable enough to tell him about her other side. When the group resettled, Alexis and Sterling stood before them all, addressing why they'd all gathered. Sterling stepped forward first. We've got to make this quick, everyone, because we have no idea how long this opportunity we've just gotten is gonna stay open. Many of you know, obviously, in the past we've had a lot of conflicts with an overseer named Eloise Ludum. She's turned her dimension into a gathering place for overseers to come and watch kidnapped people and creatures from all across the multiverse fight to the death against their wills. Alexis stepped up next. Last time we were there, our friend Astra here, through some questionable tactics, managed to curse Ludum so that we could track her movements if she ever left her dimension. Kayla raised her sentient biomechanical arm and said, Wait, I thought Astra's curse just let us get back into Eloise's dimension whenever we wanted. Astra stood to the side with her arms crossed as Kayla looked over to her. It does a lot of things. Do we need to get into the details, or can we get going? You were all pretty sour about how I went about cursing Ludum, but at least now it can finally be useful if we take this shot. Yeah, come on everybody, we get it. The curse is just like one of them plot device curses. It does whatever we need it to. Come on, Silva, Rocky, what's all this exposition leading to? Sterling nodded. Finally, Ludum is on the move. Half an hour ago, she transported herself to dimension F619. We honestly don't really know anything about this dimension or how dangerous it might be. It could honestly be a trap. But with all of us fighting together, we trust we can handle whatever Ludum might throw at us. Benny raised a hand. Just a little side note here, but where's your B team at, Silva? Not that I want that ratty little murder attempting gopher coming with us, but if we need all hands on deck here, I feel like that healing kid could at least help us out a bit. The B team is in serious need of rest and recovery. Plus, given you all don't know them that well, and there are some obvious trust issues between you and Gooby, they're staying behind for this one. As far as I can tell, everyone here in this room trusts each other to have each other's backs if things get messy, right? Astra looked around anxiously, but everyone nodded, even to her. Though as they nodded, a few eyes settled on Dr. Champagne McGregor. Don't worry, folks. Champierre's coming for moral support, mostly. He's planning to stand back from all the fighting. We're just trying to do more fun stuff as a couple, you know?
You got the weirdest idea of fun, Benny.
Everyone just rolled with it and got their watches set to take them to F619. Sterling did a countdown. Vasilia was eager for a battle, especially with this group that she was continuously becoming more and more fond of. But as they all hit their watches to go, something strange happened. Instead of the usual purple glow from the watches, crimson veins of streaky light sparked across Vasilia's arm. She looked around and the same was happening to each of her friends. An unintentional growl rumbled out of Vasilia's throat as a distant but painfully familiar feeling overtook her. She felt her body transforming and couldn't understand why. She hadn't unintentionally transformed into her other side in over a decade. Worse still, her friends didn't know of her other form, though some suspected. She wanted to hide away, but the light overtook her and her allies. In the instant of consumption, she felt her bones shift and pores burst forth with fur. As the light around her cleared, she roared out and looked down to see she'd transformed for the first time in years into a Were-Jaguar. But to her great surprise, she was far from the only person in her group to change. Vasilia appeared in an open field. On one side was mountains, another was deteriorating forest. Behind them, a lake, and a few hundred feet ahead was a castle-like mansion that her friends from more modern worlds would have described as rustic and Victorian. Her friends were all there as well, but all were in altered forms and snarling and scratching at each other mindlessly. For the moment, Vasilia was more concerned with her own form. Alright, Vasilia, just change back. You have done many times before. Breathe slowly and... But nothing happened. Her panic grew more as screeches came forth from the field around her. Not being able to transform back to her true self at will, with all those she trusted around her, was quite literally a nightmare of Vasilia's. But after a moment, she had to stop trying to shift and address the more pressing issue. She hadn't seen where Heath had gone or what he'd become, but she turned to Benny, who had shifted into a green state and sprouted a long fish-like tail and armored shells across his body. Benjamin? Are you alright? Benny swirled around and lashed his tail at her head, smacking her. She snarled but didn't strike back. He ran off towards the water. Some of the others were headed for the woods and the mountains, and as the field began to clear, Vasilia finally spotted what looked like a hyena in Astra's clothing, swiping claws at a woman in a gaudy, flowing gown with massive hair surrounded by a green bubble of energy. Oh, I'm so sorry, Astra darling. Did you not know that this dimension transforms any who come into it into mindless monsters? Unless you know how to protect yourself, that is, she said, tapping on her bubble. Astra slobbered as she chomped and clawed furiously at the bubble to no effect. I was actually concerned you'd simply turn into your dragon form and have control, but it seems I've lucked out here. Anyhow, I hate to leave you all like this, but I imagine the hunters are on their way. Play nice, toodaloo. The woman and her bubble vanished, and Astra ran around in a circle, sniffing the ground where Eloise had just been. Vasilia cautiously walked over, still desperately uncomfortable to be in her altered form around her friends, no matter what state they were in. Friend Astra, you are in there somewhere, yes? The snarling hyena turned and lunged at Vasilia, cackling as she tried to tackle the jaguar. Vasilia easily caught her out of the air and stomped her into the ground, pinning her down.
Friend Astra, if you are anything like me, you can learn to control this.
Astra thrashed and clawed, but Vasilia ducked the strikes and continued to pin her, trying not to revel in how much she enjoyed the strength of her jaguar form.
Friend Astra, please, you are one who knows most about multiverse strangeness. You must help me fix this.
She lowered her head and stared right into Astra's golden eyes. Her gaze was darting around, but for the briefest moment locked with Vasilia's. Through the hyena's snarls and cackles, she managed to growl out,
Home. Safe?
Vasilia's eyes shot down to her watch. She did her best to pin Astra with her shoulder so she could paw at the device. With her furry, padded hands, it was harder to use, but she managed to get it set to take her back to the sharp tank. Just as she was about to press it, though, a blast rang across the field, and a sharp pain suddenly exploded through Vasilia's shoulder. She roared angrily, and the recoil left enough wiggle room for Astra to kick her away and sprint off to the forest. A puttering vehicle that shot foul smog into the air was barreling towards Vasilia from the direction of the mansion. From it suddenly came an arrow that Vasilia snatched out of the air with her teeth and chomped in half. Through the pain in her shoulder, she pressed the button on her watch, and purple light overtook her. In seconds, she was back in front of the sharp tank, and her body had shifted back to its normal, human state. Vasilia looked around, wanting to make sure nobody would see what she was about to do, then consciously chose to transform into her Were-Jaguar self. She succeeded, then changed back, successfully again. She had control once more. And on top of that, her wound sealed as she shifted state. It still hurt to move her arm, but at least the bleeding had stopped.
Alright, Vasilia, you go back, send friends home, they turn back to normal, and perhaps they shall all think Were-Jaguar form was simply a result of strange monster dimension magic. Is foolproof plan? Well, not foolproof, but is planned.
She tried to ease herself, but was still anxious they'd learn about her secret. She set her watch back to F619 and returned, once more being forced into her Were-Jaguar form. As the light cleared, she saw a crossbow held right to her face. The bow fired, but Vasilia ducked aside and snatched the weapon away from a short, blonde woman in a black coat. Vasilia snarled.
Fire at me once more, and I will give you reason to wish your first shot had gone through my head.
The girl suddenly staggered back. You can speak? Fascinating. Are you in control of your faculties? Vasilia hated being around others in her Were-Jaguar form, but felt she needed to maintain confidence.
I am indeed, and while my friends currently are not, I will not permit you to fire upon them either.
Friends? You refer to the other creatures that have just appeared onto our estate through the Hellgate? If you think you can stop me from the hunt, you clearly don't know who I am.
Why would I? Who are you? Where are we?
I am Annelies Van Helsing, and you are in the yard of the noble hunting lineage of the Van Helsing family.
Ah, Van Helsing. A version of your family exists in my world as well. But regardless, I will not permit you to hunt my friends. I apologize for appearing on your property without permission, but we did not come through some hell gate. We came from another dimension. We were tricked into coming here and turning into these monstrous forms. Though I am used to being a Were-Jaguar. My friends, not as much. My friends may not currently be in control of themselves, but all I need to do to fix them is return them home. Would you please be so kind as to assist me in this venture, Annelies?
You speak of other worlds, other Van Helsings. Further and further fascinating. Gangadharan, come forth from the auto, you must meet this woman. A voice spoke forth from the vehicle a few yards back. I feel perfectly content listening from here, Miss Van Helsing. Oh, come now, Gangadharan, be polite. She's clearly not going to harm us. The figure sighed and slumped out towards them. You are far more trusting than one should be in your line of work, Miss Van Helsing. Please, I promise to stop calling you Gongi if you would refer to me as Annelies. That was our deal, do you recall? He came into view and Vasilia saw that he was a mid-height, tired-looking but well-dressed young man carrying a massive bag overflowing with papers, potions, and weapons. If you truly insist, Miss Annelies. Close enough. This is Gangadharan Sambhaavana. He is our ward and ingenious researcher. While our family's hunting skills are well renowned, we'd be nowhere without his aid. Vasilia was surprised to hear it, given his tired and disinterested demeanor, but she replied politely all the same.
I am Vasilia Kuznet, pleased to make your acquaintance. She held out her paw to shake his hand, but he jumped back as the claw came towards him. A swirl of anxiety and anger shot through Vasilia at the response, but she clenched her teeth and held her composure. If all went as hoped, she'd never see these people again, or have to face their judgment over her other side. Annelies stepped forward, somewhat imposingly. "We will help you, Vasilia, but know this, if your friends try to seriously harm Gangadharan or any other innocents on our grounds, I will be forced to take lethal measures." Vasilia could feel a growl rumbling in her throat at the threat, but replied, "Understood, Van Helsing. I will not let it come to that." It was a promise she seriously hoped she could keep. Vasilia caught Annelies and Gangadharan up on all they needed to know, and she learned some things about their world as well. It was more technologically advanced than her own, but far less than many of her friends. There were creatures and beasts, but most were not colossal monstrosities like many of the dragons from Vasilia's world. Every so often, a creature would appear out of nowhere in the Van Helsing's yard, in the field that they referred to as the Hellgate. They'd built their estate around it decades ago specifically to be ready to hunt anything that appeared before it could harm others. When they were all caught up, the trio set off to the water where Vasilia had seen Benny scurrying off to. Vasilia had heard him mention before something about tracking devices in the watches her friends all wore, but had no idea how to activate them. She hoped once she got him home, he could tell her how to use it so she could find the others. They drove some distance in the Van Helsing's puttering, foul-stenched vehicle, but soon realized it was too loud, and walked the rest of the way to the lake. They crouched near some tall reeds, and Gangadharan pried Vasilia for more information. "So, what did this Benjamin fellow look like in his monster form, besides a fishtail and green shells? Any helpful information you can provide would be greatly appreciated, Jaguar." "I am not... My name is Vasilia, and I'm not certain. It was a hectic moment when we arrived. I believe he had glowing dots on shoulder and chest. Had some kind of blades from forearms as well." "Alright, well it's less to go off of than I'd like, but it sounds somewhat akin to a swamp skulker. If you recall, Annelies, the creature I hunted with your cousin Vincent that had been cursed by a mystical pentagonal barnacle. It can propel itself through the water at great speeds, has a double-set jaw and incredibly sharp teeth, as well as retractable blades on its forearms. It will be very difficult to catch in the water, so our best bet is to lure it onto dry land." "Right. Thank you, Gangadharan. I'll march the water's edge and try to draw it forth. Vasilia, you be ready to pounce. Gangadharan, a net at the ready if need be." Vasilia's shoulder throbbed as she eyed the now reloaded musket that Annelies carried. "Worry not, Vasilia, this is merely for protection. If I see something coming for Gangadharan, I need to be ready." Vasilia nodded somewhat grudgingly as Annelies started walking the water's edge, splashing her foot in and out every few feet, trying to draw out Benny. After a few moments, Vasilia briefly looked away to see that Gangadharan had inched farther away from her. "I am completely in control, Gangadharan. I have had control of this form since my late teenage years." "Forgive my distrust, Jaguar, but when you've hunted enough werebeasts, you come to find that most who claim control greatly lack it." "I assure you I have hunted dozens of were-creatures myself. How you think I became Were-Jaguar in first place? I will say, in early days I harmed family members and neighbors more times than I care to admit, but since I have fully gained control and have not turned into this form for many years, my friends aren't even aware I am Were-Jaguar, and I intend to keep it that way so they don't act towards me as you are now. Besides, your friend Annelies seems quite determined to keep you safe if I do strike." "Yes, well, Annelies may have always kept me safe from any serious injury in the field, but given how many monsters she brings me out to help her hunt, it's only a matter of time before one lays a death blow that she can't stop." "You strike me as men with great trust issues. Does not serve you well, I believe." "Well, if that isn't the pot calling the kettle black." Rage suddenly stirred in Vasilia's mind. "Excuse me? You claim I have trust issues, and yet if you truly have control over this form and all its power, why would you not be constantly turning into it?" "Because I get enough judgment from family for it after years of not having control. Friends need not know about Were-Jaguar form, even if I do have control now. Only further emphasizing my point. Either you don't have as much control as you claim and avoid turning to conceal that fact, or you do have full control as you say, and don't trust your friends to be accepting of your more fanged side. So don't lecture me about trust, because you're either a liar or a hypocrite. Vasilia's eyes shot wide open, and she actively repressed the urge to bare her fangs at Gangadharan. Before she could truly retort, a burst of blue light illuminated the whole lakeside. Vasilia, I found one of your friends, but it's not the one we sought. Vasilia leapt out from her cover as Annelies raised her weapon towards Kayla. Vasilia's once mechanically enhanced friend now appeared like a half-grey and sparking ghoul, with spikes jutting from one arm and leg. Annelies' weapon was raised, but she continued to back away towards the water as Kayla approached. Vasilia sprinted at Kayla on all fours, watch all set to take them home. Just as Vasilia was ready to leap at her target, Kayla whipped around and fired a bolt of electricity at Vasilia. Vasilia rolled across the ground, thrashing and jittering from the shock. While still shaking, she looked over at Annelies, musket still raised. Don't shoot! I can do this! I'll hold off as long as I can, but you better hurry. Gangadharan, recommendations? Barely peeking out from hiding, Gangadharan called, She appears to resemble the electrokinetics of the cult of the ghoul we faced years back. They are possessed by demonic entities that can only cover a part of the subject's body at a time. Aim for her legs to force her to protect her lower half, and perhaps her mind will regain some composure, though that too is a long shot. He pulled from his bag a large mallet and tossed it to Annelies. It was a terrible throw and barely got close. She darted towards it, but before she could grab it, a green figure fired up from the water between her and the weapon. Benny, in his swamp skulker form, snarled his jagged teeth, twirled around and smacked Annelies backwards. She rolled into the water, but was up quickly. She looked down at her musket, now soaked. Wonderful. Wet gunpowder. Gangadharan, ready the crossbow. She flipped her musket around as Benny leapt at her, and she slammed its butt against his head, and he flopped past her back into the waters and vanished. Vasilia had finally stopped shaking and leapt up to see Kayla's arms sparking up once more, aimed at Annelies. Vasilia lunged forward right into the path of the shot and was struck once more with electricity. She rolled across the ground but quickly tried to claw herself back towards Kayla. Annelies, get out of water! Vasilia fought through the pain and thrust herself at Kayla's legs, slashing both claws with very telegraphed strikes. The grey forms on Kayla's body shifted down over her legs, making her skin dense enough that the slashes did nothing. But Kayla suddenly came to for a moment. Oh, what's... Vasilia? What's going on? For the briefest of moments, Vasilia considered pretending she was a possessed monster as well, but quickly shook the thought and said, Kayla, will you have control? Jump into water. Kayla looked down at her legs and saw the electricity sparking off them, but the grey form started shifting back up towards her head. Trust me, Kayla, it will hurt, yes, but it's better than having crossbow through head. Okay, I trust you, Vasilia. Anxiously, Kayla ran forward and leapt into the air, just as the creature took control again. It thrashed its body as it fell towards the water, but splashed into the lake. A burst of blue electricity shot through the waters. Kayla shrieked, then passed out. Not far from her, Benny floated up to the surface, writhing in shock. The sparks ceased, as both Kayla and Benny fell unconscious, and Vasilia waded into the water to grab them both. While holding them, she had her watch bring them all home. Benny and Kayla's bodies were both back to normal the second they arrived, and Vasilia slapped Benny's face till he awoke. Ow, stop that, what the heck is going on? Why does my mouth taste like I was chewing on batteries again? What the heck is happening? Wait, where's Champ? Vasilia slapped him once more. Benjamin, it's not time to panic. You must show me how to use tracking devices on watch machines. It took some shaking to get Benny to cooperate, and of course promising that she'd get Champagne home quickly, but Benny finally set up Vasilia's watch so that she could track the others. She quickly jumped back to Annelies and Gangadharan's world. It took a moment to regroup as she'd appeared back at the Hellgate field, but at least now they knew they had a method of tracking everyone down and returning them home safely.
Vasilia and her new allies spent the next few hours hunting and zapping her monsterized friends back home. Some were easier than others. Heath had become a cyclops, Alexis a golem, Tayron some kind of fox creature. Vasilia was thankful that Mara, who was already part demon, had actually been significantly powered down into some form of vampire. She could have been a very difficult person to stop. By the time morning approached, Vasilia had gotten everyone home, except for Champagne. Her watch indicated that they were close on his tail, but she was getting anxious, remembering that he'd claimed he trusted her more than anyone to keep him safe. And, of course, she knew Benny would be back home worrying until Champagne was returned. Finally, they emerged from the woods, and in the near distance, lumbering down a hill, was some kind of lizard creature, headed towards a small village. Vasilia quickly set her watch and sprinted towards him, but just as she darted ahead, a blast rang out. "This way, creature! You want a meal? Find it with us!" Annelies yelled, holding a smaller musket aimed straight upwards, trying to urge him away from the sleeping civilians. Champagne whipped his head around and looked back up the hill. Vasilia still ran towards him, but as she got closer, she realized just how large he was. Even hunched over, he was 12 feet tall, and she just noticed his clubbed tail as it swirled around and smacked her so hard, she blacked out for the faintest moment before feeling herself roll across the dirt. By the time she was back on her feet, Champagne was nearly on top of Annelies and Gangadharan. He lunged his jaw towards Gangadharan, and Annelies leapt in front, hammering a musket into his snout. She shoved Gangadharan aside while pulling the mallet from his bag. She hammered it against Champagne's head, and he roared furiously before slashing a claw at her. He hurled her 10 feet away and slashed 3 gashes into her arm. Vasilia charged at him and lunged for his back, but Champagne suddenly thrust backwards, and his dorsal plate slammed into Vasilia, knocking her back to the ground. Before he swung at her again, hitting her with his tail and sending her nearly all the way down the hill. Champagne eyed down Gangadharan once more and opened his maw wide. "Well, I hate to say I told you so, when no one is around to hear it." Gangadharan moaned as he clammed his eyes shut, ready for the strike. Champagne thrust his teeth down, but instead of feeling daggers in his flesh, Gangadharan just felt the slight spatter of warm blood on his cheek. He opened his eyes to see Annelies had leapt between him and the bite. Champagne chomped down onto her body, then hurled her down the hill next to Vasilia. Vasilia stopped her from rolling farther, but Annelies' torso was torn open, and she was choking up blood. Even still, she grabbed Vasilia's arm shakily and said, "Save Gangadharan." Vasilia looked up as Champagne snarled and seemed to be debating who to strike next. Gangadharan stood paralyzed in shock at what Annelies had just done. Before Champagne could select a target, Vasilia hurled Annelies over her shoulder and sprinted up the hill. "Gangadharan, please, grab creature's tail!" "What? Why would I ever?" "Please, just trust me, I will save you, but you have to do this." Champagne, luckily, was looking down at the approaching Jaguar now. After a moment of fear and indecision, Gangadharan leapt down and wrapped himself around Champagne's tail. Champagne swung his head back and roared at the grappler. Vasilia got within a few feet and pressed her watch. Light started to streak up across her body, and she leapt towards Champagne. He started to turn back, too late. She grabbed hold of him just as Light overtook her and the others. There was a brief moment of panicked nothingness before they all slumped to the floor outside the sharp tank. Champagne and Vasilia were back to normal, but Annelies was still bleeding out. Vasilia quickly threw open the doors where her whole group of recovered allies were still confused and reconvening. Vasilia ran up to Sterling. "Friend Sterling, quickly, where is your friend who does healing?" Within minutes, Jake Tajin, aka the Kid, was sat next to Annelies, healing her as she lay reclined on a couch. Gangadharan had spent the last hour pacing the room near her. Eventually, Jake asked him to leave because he was making the Kid anxious. At that point, Gangadharan once more crossed paths with Vasilia. "Well, we very much seem to have saved the worst for last, did we not? Is that, Dr. Champagne the most powerful of your friends?"
Not really, no, but power in creature forms such as these can sometimes stem from anger. So in that regard, does not surprise me he would be most vicious. But worry not, Sterling has assured me that while young Jacob's powers take some time to work, he will be able to save Annelies.
"Well, thank you, both for finding a way to save her, as well as myself."
"Was no trouble, as soon as you decided to trust me, that is."
Yes, I suppose you're right, and I also suppose I should put further trust in Annelies, given what she was willing to do to keep me safe.
Glad to hear you admit, though I suppose I must concur with your earlier infuriating analysis, as I was indeed being hypocrite for judging your lack of trust in friends. I do have control of Were-Jaguar form, truly, and I should trust that friends will be accepting of it. Will likely be quite useful when we actually get to hunt down women that we'd come to your world to find.
Kayla suddenly poked her head out from behind a corner. Hey, Vasilia, not that I was eavesdropping, but you do know that we all already know about your Were-Jaguar form, right?
What? How? When did... What?
Yeah, and I mean, you obviously just proved you can control it, and even if you just told us that, we would have believed you. We're all cool with it.
But I never... How did you know?
Well, I mean, Benny told us months ago. Vasilia's teeth suddenly stretched out into fangs.
Excuse me for a moment, Gangadharan. My other half needs to have chat with friend Benjamin.
Well, there we go. A new Multiverse Tales episode, a new background, a new community redraw, and of course we can roll into the prompt for the next community redraw. After a few little things up top here, first, thank you so much to everyone who submitted for this month. It was really cool getting to see all your monstery versions of my own original characters. Massive thank you to the people who were selected for this episode. Jonah, Nation of the Vengeful, Griffin Lee Zero, White Glove, Glitchy Ronin, and Pokemon Gamer Gian. Now, a few other little updates here. I wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who voted for me to get picked to do a presentation at South by Southwest next year. I unfortunately have found out that I wasn't picked. I think there's still a good chance I'm going to go to the event because I love going to South by Southwest. I did a presentation there in 2018 and it was so much fun. And of course, I'm likely going to put in another pitch for the following year. Also, I mentioned a couple weeks ago that the channel had gotten a big influx of fake views and subscribers, and I didn't know what was happening or where they were coming from. I still don't know where they came from or how that all happened, but it has mostly stopped now. I think about 80% of the views I'm getting are real, genuine views. But overall, it's just kind of given me a good excuse to not focus on my analytics so much, which has kind of been a blessing in disguise. And maybe someday I'll learn what exactly happened here. Finally, next Sunday, there is going to be another live Discord Q&A, specifically focused around whatever questions you have about Multiverse Tales. The exact time hasn't been finalized yet, but if you join the PopCross HQ Discord, linked in the description, there will be an event set up when it's finalized, so you can see the time, and I'll put out a community post saying the exact time. But now, of course, with all that out of the way, we can get into the prompt for next month, which, as you all know, as soon as Halloween is over, it's officially Christmas. So we're getting into the Christmas community redraw, and the real reason for that is more so because if I did the Christmas redraw in December, the actual episode wouldn't come out until after Christmas, whereas if we do it in November, the episode will come out right as December is starting, and, you know, that's the time when normal people consider Christmas starting. It's going to involve you all designing evil, villainy versions of Christmas characters, but if you want to participate, please go to the Google Docs linked in the description and the pinned comment, because there's more specific instructions than usual. The story for it's going to revolve around Sterling and the B-Team, our recent escapees from the Backcells prison saga, in a video called Kate Kills Claus. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is the idea that things we dislike most in others are often things we see as reflections of ourselves. If you really hate a trait of someone else's, remember that there's a good chance that there's some of that within yourself, and just use their negative actions as a good reminder of how you don't want to act and how you do want to treat others. For instance, if you really hate hypocrites, maybe you should keep a watch on the fact that maybe you can be one sometimes yourself. I hope that's inspiring to someone out there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.